Hi everyone. While we're waiting for the session to start, please participate this poll. You can scan this QR code or type in. The poll is about asking a warm-up activity, asking you what's your biggest question about using artificial intelligence and large language models in institutional research. Thank you for those who participated in the poll. And now we have everyone, we can get started. Today's topic is integrating large language model based artificial intelligence. That's mouthful for institutional research. LLM based AI. I'm going to share my practical approaches and strategies for you, and hopefully you can take away with very practical, concrete examples and tips and strategies. So a little bit about myself. I am trained in mixed method research at UCLA. I have a PhD in higher ed. And by mixed method, I'm referring to both interview and quantitative analysis. So textual analysis is actually my thing and I have a lot of experience with how to manually, traditionally analyze it. However, nowadays with LLM, I can do that even better. But I mean, the domain knowledge and the experience with that has helped me to do textual analysis. Now I am a IR analyst at LaSalle University. I built IR workflow with R and Python. I have been sharing this type of presentations in the previous AIR forum. And in my office, my job responsibility spans across survey research, program review, dashboards, and reporting. So I used R and Python programming and script to do all those IR tasks. So that's my IR experience. And beyond my professional official role, I also have this YouTube tutorial where I share use cases, projects, and overall my professional learning and development journey. And my previous presentations are all there as well. So feel free to subscribe. And then let me briefly say this. This we only have, I hope, only 30 minutes so that we can have more time to talk interactively. So this presentation is going to be a short and concise one based on two presentations that I already posted on my channel. The first is focusing on the approaches and methods of navigating large language models. The second is a full presentation of this one where I have a little bit more extra slides and the full strategy explained in detail. So if you are interested in learning more, you can check out those two videos. And now focusing on you. You submitted your question, your biggest question about LLM and artificial intelligence in institutional research. Please raise your hand if your question is like a conceptual one, like how do you define LLM? What is it? And what is the training process? And what is the limitation? So all those are conceptual questions. And thanks for those who raise your hand. And those are very foundational questions to help us to understand what is the training purpose, training processes behind the scene so that we can understand it better with that knowledge of the training process, and we'll cover that in this presentation. Please raise your hand if your question you submitted in the poll is a technical one. Those about like what are the codes look like? How do I do programming? How do I implement LLM? And how do I evaluate the output? So those are very practical questions. And thanks for those hands, and you are a very practical person, and kudos to that. And then a third type of question, please raise your hand to let me know if your question is more about the psychological side of things. And I'm going to raise my hand here because I have already a lot thinking about the AI and this human relationship, especially for IR, as we are heavily involved with data science and technical things. So you may have some anxiety like me wondering if AI is going to replace us or partially replace us, or how do I catch up with all those overwhelming stage of all the different things coming up all the time. So we're going to briefly talk about that as well, especially in the Q&A if you are interested in this perspective. And lastly, if you have a strategic question, please raise your hand. So what I mean by strategic is you are thinking about the value of using LLM, how to embed LLM in your office workflow, how to ask for budget, how about implementing this and making a case in terms of its value, and doing some planning, considering the ethical privacy issues there. So it's more of the bigger picture. Thanks for those hands. These are leadership quality. Like those person who ask those questions have leadership quality, I believe, because you are thinking about like the bigger picture. So that's all the questions I hope to touch on today. But I'd like to share with you my biggest question in a question format. So what LLM can do for IR? That has been my original question when I'm designing this session, and we're going to talk about today. And then since it has all the fancy capabilities, on the other hand, what are the pitfalls, the quality of its output, the privacy issue, whether it's a hype or like, which means the buzzword there are actually for marketing purpose maybe, and our current technology is actually not as advanced as the marketing people say. So that's some of the different sides of what LLM can do and cannot do. And then what are the use cases? How have IR implemented LLM in IR? And I believe you already seen a lot of presentations talking about that. And here I'm going to also touch on that, but in a more interactive way, as you all figure later. But I'm also going to provide you a sample code and more sample code if you follow my YouTube channel, and share some getting started steps there. And also strategies and skills reflected from the experiences of using LLM in a variety of ways in IR. And lastly, which is more of a conceptual level of question, like which LLM model to use, because we need to understand the training purposes behind it and the feature each LLM has, and we're going to touch on that too. And also the strategic questions like the budget, how to make a real impact, how to evaluate its performance and improve its performance. So also technical questions there. We're going to answer those three big questions through three concrete approaches of the LLM. So the three approaches as a overarching theme throughout this presentation. I'm going to guide you through each of the approach, and in each of the approach, we will answer those questions. So the first approach is if you are using LLM chatbots, which means you are using chatgpt.com or Claude.ai, stuff like that. So that's one way of using LLM, which is a very beginner-friendly way. You do not need to code. You do not need to do anything as long as you can type and you can ask some question, although your question is important. So we will focus on that later. And then the second way of us using LLM is code-based. So you are programming, you are using API, or you are building your own local machine. So that's all you have to write the code to do it. And then lastly, there are a lot of applications, software, and tools emerging more and more nowadays. And those are kind of the third approach. You are using the tool, and the tool newly developed some AI function, LLM-based summary, for example. So you are actually using LLM-based AI if you are using that type of software. So I believe this is a comprehensive way of conceptualizing our interaction with LLM in terms of institutional research, the field of IR. And I hope that could be helpful to guide you as a way to think about what are the different entry points, what are the different level of skills, and if you have a type of skill, what are the appropriate approach for you to use, or if you are interested in use LLM in certain way, like code-based implementation, as I'm going to introduce the pros and cons of it, and you are interested, what are you going to do to get started? So let's get started by focusing on the first approach, LLM chatbots. So those are already available for you to use by Googling them, and you can find the right place to create an account and use them. There are ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, DeepSeek, if you have heard that influenced the stock market a bit when it first came out, Perplexity, and more. So when facing this variety of tools to use, we might ask ourselves how to choose from those chatbots. And I have some tips for you. The first is to search leaderboards if you are a very scientific, technical, and serious about it. So leaderboards, there's a whole computer scientist community developing very scientific benchmarking for the performances, and this is one of them. You can just Google LLM leaderboards, and many of them will appear, and this is only one of them taken in March. So they change a few time of maybe days, I don't know. However, this is the showcase for you for the different tasks, such as like coding here, the Claude is the best when the time I take this screenshot. And then reasoning is different, knowledge is OpenAI. So this tells us that LLM, a specific LLM might not be the best for across different tasks. If your task is very specific, and if you know a specific LLM is excellent on that task, you might choose that LLM in that way. So the second is actually related to this. So if you understand how LLM is trained, it might help you to understand why this leaderboard looks like this. Because here is a process. Someone wrote an article about how LLM gets trained. And this is the process, and I believe it accurately reflects the process of LLM training. The first is a large unlabeled data set to feed in, and then it has some pre-processing and pre-training to learn from all those unlabeled data set, which means the data set really matters because that's the input of the model. If the data set is all about coding, then of course the model is going to perform better on coding because the learning material is a lot of coding. And then there is later after the model is trained, there is post-training, and I believe prompt maybe also count in the post-training, and we will discuss more on that. And we have an expert in the room later in the Q&A. If you have questions, maybe you can reach out to him. And then optimization. And optimization might be the iterative process of doing evaluation and improve your prompts. And then, so that's about the training. I kind of introduced every step to help us to understand why, for example, Claude is performing the best in code. Maybe it's because the data set stage. And sometimes maybe why sometimes like ChatGPT is perform better than Claude in your personal experience. Maybe you asked two different questions. The one you used to ask ChatGPT is much clearer than the time when you tried Claude. So post-training, when you are doing your prompt, is also matters. So this is the different stage that matters for LLM performance. And this also is going to influence the LLM performance. And you can kind of understand how to choose the LLM in a more conceptual and fundamental way by understanding LLM training. And then lastly, the tip is on testing different models for specific tasks. And then for this one, I have my personal preference. So for coding, I actually opt for Gemini because it has unlimited usage, I believe, and And maybe nowadays, because the leaderboards just shift a lot, so nowadays maybe Gemini is actually performing very well on this leaderboard. And then for Claude, I used it for long text summary or generation, and if I think this document is going to be important. While for other simple or regular tasks, I use ChatGPT. So that's only from my personal experimentation. You can do your own comparison for across different tasks and choose your favorite. So that's chatbots. And then let's talk more about prompting. And as I mentioned before, it's this stage in the training process that's going to matter the output quality, which is your prompt. I'm going to go through this really quickly because you can check out the YouTube video I posted. So basically what consists of a good prompt, I did a literature review and this is what I found. You have to define the role of the LLM. You have to define your context, your challenge goal and background. You have to input your task with very specific verb. That's what's recommended from others' experiment and from the literature review I did. And then you supply your data if available and some example if available. That's going to help. And the output, you need to specify the format, the style, and what to avoid or exclude. So that's what consists a good prompt. And this is the tips for prompt engineering. And let's compare, overview, concluding this approach. There are pros and cons. The pros of using LLM chatbots, that they are readily available, they're easy to apply for quick tasks and brainstorming, but they have limited usage if you are on the free tier. Although it has free access, but it's limited. So you can subscribe. However, it's a recurring cost each month. It's not charged by usage, and you are locked in with one specific subscription. As we discussed before, not the tasks, the performance for each task are different. So if you have the flexibility to choose, that's better. And then that's why we are coming to our second approach, which is code-based, and there are two sub approaches. One is using API, the other is local. API are cost efficient because they are charged by usage, not a monthly subscription. And they allow you to select from multiple model because you can generate an API for each of the model you're interested in. And if you don't use it, it's free. Like you don't have to pay. And then another one I have to highlight here is my favorite feature is it opens you up to a open source community with cutting edge tools. What I mean is, if you are using coding and programming, Python and R, there are other nerds and data passionates who are developing cutting edge tools. And usually those tools are fixing the newest challenges and they are developing based on all the input from the community. So it's running and developing very rapidly. And it's usually, and it's free for most important of all. And you can try out and play around with it. It's very interesting and exciting to be a part of that community. And then the last point is actually a limitation of this API approach because you cannot send sensitive raw data to it. It might be okay if the data is already summarized and you can send those summarized data insight into LLM and ask questions about it. But for raw data, especially those containing student ID, SSN, those very sensitive, important information, you cannot send to API. I mean, you can, but maybe it's not, you're going to get fired maybe because you're exposing your student data information to the company, the LLM company, because you're sending an API request with your data. You're sending something very sensitive to other and sharing it. So that's not recommended. And that's why this local deployment might offer some advantage on this because everything is local. So the data is very secure on your local machine. However, you have to set up the infrastructure which desire better resource, better GPU is always better. So that requires those resources. And then another disadvantage of it is this performance trade-off. So you may have better security, but the performance is not going to be comparable to those big tech companies' large language model. So that's something you have to consider. But from my experience, our IR task, especially for the college I work in, we have small data set, we have simple task. If I have a complex task, I can also divide it into smaller pieces with simpler kind of expectations. So I can still try this local deployment. So that's the overview of this approach with two sub approach. And if you are interested in this is how you can get started. First, install a VS Code, which is an interactive development interface, basically where you write your Python code. If you are going to do this, Google and YouTube VS Code extension, because the extensions is a must-have and very useful tool to download. And then if you are going to do the local deployment, this is the software, and there are other softwares out there similar like this one. So click this link, and you will see how to use Python with this Ollama. Ollama is a place to manage open source large language models, and you can use Python to connect to your local large language model. You download it through Ollama. So that's the local approach. Or you're going to set up your API key, and then this is the link to check out how to use and how to set up the API key. So basically the API key, as the visualization here, is a bridge between you and the service, the LLM provider. This is a sample code if you are interested in. So really quickly, I loaded the library, I loaded my API key, I loaded my meeting note to provide LLM the context and a template to give it a few examples. So remember the prompt engineering component. So those are good practice to give it more context for it to understand what I'm trying to do here. And then the prompt itself and a connection of API through the OpenAI Python library, and then get the response. And this is the response I got. Not perfect, but I can always revise and to tell LM to what to do and what not to do based on what I like and dislike in this output. And I can try it again and iteratively improve the performance and reuse that type of prompt for my next survey design project. So that's the code-based approach. Our final approach is using a variety of apps. And first of all is the chatbot apps I talked about, mentioned before. This is the code-based VS Code extension I recommend you to install, which has Copilot, Amazon Q, Windsurf. Those are all coding assistant that I have used along while I'm working on the programming and coding. They can autocomplete, which is super handy to use. And then lastly is those AI functioned apps. If you have heard Copilot before, you might be already using it in your Excel. It can help you to summarize some table. You can ask question and it can create a visualization based on or summarization into a table based on the data within Excel. And Copilot is embedded in other Microsoft suite based on your subscription type. And then Notebook LM is another tool I really like, which is heavily LM based. It turns your article or some URL links and summarize it for you and can turn it to a podcast if you prefer to learn by listening things. So futures and considerations. First of all, I believe more and more AI features will appear in our daily use apps. And there is something called AI agents, and I believe it's currently a hype right now, which means it's not really technically real, and we have not achieve to a stage that the AI can automatically end-to-end complete all the tasks themselves. We humans still plays a very important role in the quality control piece. So AI agent is not the real world now, but would it become the future? I have serious doubt on that, and we can discuss more on that. And then ethical frameworks. It's always the data privacy we need to consider, the transparency, and having community engagement like this one, where we collaboratively figure out how do we use LLM responsibly and practically and efficiently. And then let me share with you, since we've talked about the three different approaches, let me share with you in combination the use cases. But this is actually an interactive activity. Since we are hitting the 25-minute time, I'd like to take a little break for you to participate in this activity, which is you can scan here now. What tasks have you regularly used LLM-based AI tools? So all the options there are the use cases I have been using it, and I like to see how you the audiences is using it. So let me go to the poll activities place and see how everyone is answering. And we will spend like 1 more minute on it. So these are the options. So I've used LLM to design survey, to analyze qualitative comments data, to write code in the as I mentioned before, in VS Code, they have a lot of extensions that are very handy for autocomplete and also debugging my code. I have used it for generating and revising my email tags, my reports, and my presentation scripts also, like this one. And then I have used it for summary and discussing it as a reading companion. And then I also have recently taken advantage of this multimedia function of LLM where you can turn text into message, turn text into video, so multimedia enabled. Okay, let's go back to our presentation. And that's our use case. And I hope you find something maybe new or you through this activity you see how other people are using it, although it's only other people in this room. So I'd like to show you, instead of a single use case, a combination of use case in this video. So I don't have time to present from the beginning to the end, but I'm going to tell you what I did. So in a few steps, and you can go deeper, check the detail in this video. So in this one, I used ChatGPT.com, so that chatbot, to summarize and discuss a reading material I have been reading. It's a classic philosophical book. And then I chat with ChatGPT about this book, and then I export that conversation from ChatGPT into a JSON file. That's the file they sent back to me. And then I had my coding assistant, I loaded that JSON file in VS Code, had my coding assistant, Amazon Q, and Copilot and Windsurf, like all that I mentioned before, but mainly Amazon Q, actually, to be frank. And only for more complex question, I'll use Windsurf, but Amazon Q actually did a very good job personally in autocomplete tasks for me. So I used the coding assistant in VS Code to parse this JSON file, and then I parse this JSON file and ask LLM to summarize it for me. The LLM I used is Notebook LM. As I said, it's a good tool to summarize your text and then turn it into a podcast, and that's what I did. I turned the text into a video, and the video itself created by Notebook LM and based on the conversation I had with ChatGPT was also on my YouTube channel, and you can check out the quality of the output. I think it's okay or even satisfied. And then also I have been using it for revising my presentation scripts, of course, using LLM. And then the strategies and skills. This is another place where we're going to go interactive. So this is the poll. It's actually the same link, and I'm going to activate this activity for you. And in this poll, it's an open-ended question for you to put your to-do list or something you'd like to share, focusing on the skill and knowledge. So what skill or knowledge is most useful for you that you have found from your experience? Or if you are new to this, what skill or knowledge you'd like to acquire? And you can upvote or downvote the answers there as people are entering. So this is the poll, and we can check the poll there and share a little bit on it. Thanks for those who completed their answers and engaged in this activity. And I hope we all learned from each other through this. And I'm going to quickly share my strategies with you. Strategies with working with LLM from my personal failures and successes. So one step at a time is what my first tip. So it allows you to intervene early to check the quality of the output before proceed. Instead of having a large, long, complex prompt describing a complex task and not knowing the black box, it is already a black box. Don't make it even darker there. So if you try to break it down, you can have more quality control and observe the bug before it proceeds, and it's really helpful and easier debugging process. So dividing those steps. Although you can ask ChatGPT to divide the steps for you, but you as a human and an expert in data analysis might have better knowledge and assessment. So here, human input are important. Or if you are having a simpler task, but involving multiple steps, you can, of course, ask LLM to do it. But if it's more technical, need more experience, you may need to do it and intervene for that workflow design. But of course, you can try both approach and see what works and what's not. And for here, as I mentioned, like review, you need to check early, set up those checkpoints, and then you need to review, approve or disapprove, and select those output for the next step as your new input. And then you ensure the quality of each output in this way. And then the final product might be better. And evaluation is another step, as it's very related to this first step, right? Quality check. So evaluation. While here I'm emphasizing on the detail-oriented checks because LLM lies very well. So it can trick you very easily. So you may need be very detail-oriented, and you might need to have a lot of experience sometimes to identify those bugs, because it sometimes all makes sense, but sometimes it actually does not make sense at all if you can find that right place. I hope I have an example to show you. But when I find one example, I'm going to do a video and upload it on my YouTube channel. Okay, and then one more thing is LLM, as we talked about the LLM training process before, it's trained based on those data set. So those data set, it has maybe some bias. For example, the minority opinion might not be represented. This is a common critique for using large language models. So sometimes if you are having concerns on that specific type, here I put it as what is good, like what LLM think is good might be different than from what you think and your contextual institutional definition of good. Some good output, good quality of output, good insight, the diverse perspective of things might be an important piece. So you might need to assess the output and intervene there by highlighting and emphasizing the diverse piece, and sometimes even do some manual check of whether everybody's opinion is reflected. And then my last tip, which is a simple one, which is always maybe if you're not sure about how to divide a task into steps, right? Maybe you are not sure about what is a good prompt and how to write prompt. You can always ask LLM itself to help you. So you can optimize your prompt with the help of ChatGPT or LLM, and you can use them to help you to design your workflow. But they can do only to the level of a maybe regular average. If you need specific, more contextual and complex designing, you still need your own knowledge in this. And that's why when we look at the skills working with LLM, the first one I highlight here is the domain expertise. So if you are expert in a institutional research with many years of experiences, you know how to divide a research task into different steps with what institutional data you have, first of all, right? So LLM does not have that knowledge. You can hint LLM that's where the data, like which factor is the most useful for the leaders they are concerned about. You know better than LLM about the mission of your institution, so you can highlight those steps and place and features that you need to put more emphasis on and design your workflow, your task goal, your expected output that way in your prompt. So your expertise and knowledge, especially if it's very contextual and specific, is very important. And you may develop your own evaluation criteria because, as I said, LM has a general sense of what is good, but maybe you need your own criteria and tell LM that your specific criteria if they are more specific. And then another one saying we always heard is trash in, trash out. So if you are an expert, it's highly likely that you are not producing trash, right? So you don't have this problem. You may have a well-crafted draft, not necessarily a really final product, but you have your ideas, even it's free writing. There, you have your insights, you have your deep thinking or critical thinking there. That's going to be very helpful as a input for LLM because LLM does not think the way a domain expert think. So your insight and input, especially those that are very experienced and deep, that's going to be very helpful input for LLM to generate a good, not trash-like result. And then that's one big chunk of skill, which is expert are appreciated. And if you are not an expert now, you can developing yourself into one. And in the next slide, I'm going to share maybe more on that. So the second chunk of skill, actually experience, is the experiences working and experimenting with LLM so that you are familiar with the model capability and limitations, and you are familiar with those error patterns so that you can work more efficiently when you're working with LLM, not needing to identify every bug because you a little bit already expect that, and you can refine your prompt in the first place to generate and reduce the iteration. And then, as I promised, I also have a slide on those timeless qualities that I really want to emphasize here, because it's not only about the experiences with LLM, learning something new, or learning how to do prompt engineering. It's actually also about communication. When we communicate, we also need very specific, very clear instruction, like when you are a teacher, you want to teach something, or when you are presenting, or when you are having a conversation with other, you need to express yourself clearly, and which may mean you need to think clearly. So those communication skills are timeless qualities. Also apply to when you interact with LLM. If you have clear and more specific, and if you think very clearly, already have everything planned step by step, LLM is going to have a clear instruction, and they are the student taught by you. So Another one is this is why AI is not going to replace us. This timeless quality is making impact. LLM does not make impact. They are our assistants. You are going to make an impact by your relationship building, by your communication, by identify what are people's needs and those pain points. You are going to do that. You are going to be very strategic, and you are going to use LLM's help to design some like action-oriented research plan, and you are going to take what LLM generated for you and turn that into real world application. And that involves a lot of human effort. And then reflection. This is the part I said, if you are not an expert, you can be one with reflection. Reflection is always a timeless quality, as I put there. Very important growth mindset, like type of quality or habit. So you're going to need, specifically for working with LLM, you need to do detail-oriented evaluation, but detail-oriented is always a good quality before the LLM stage or era time. And then continuous learning. If not LLM, there's something else new appearing every few months, maybe, and sometimes it's very useful. So continuous learning, look for new tools, new methods, and evolving practices by maybe searching, reading, subscribing my YouTube channel, for example, and see what others are doing and learning. And maybe if you find it interesting and useful, helpful, you want to play around with it, you can do that. So continuously learning and reflecting on your own practices, and maybe sometime do a presentation on what you learned would be very helpful, because this is a community effort and we are growing together, hopefully helping each other by sharing. And then finally, we have 3 or 4 minutes left. So this is the session outcome I hope I have achieved today. So I supplied you with tips on how to choose LLM by doing prompt engineering, by doing experiment and those leaderboards. And then I provided you with a sample code. I used calling API for designing a survey, and we did this use case activity where everyone answered those use cases, and I presented with you this textual analysis of me using ChatGPT as my reading companion. Then I analyzed that and turned it into a podcast. I hope that's a fun use case for you that demonstrated a lot of different use cases in one video. Check that out if you're interested. And then we presented a few different apps like Notebook LM, Copilot, like in VS Code, there's a lot of Amazon Q coding assistant. And then, of course, those chatbots. If you only know ChatGPT before today, I hope you know there are more, and even more than I presented today, that you can play around and test and compare and do your own benchmarking. And then some ethical consideration about data privacy, transparency, and community engagement approach, some skills and strategies, and by emphasizing on those timeless qualities for communication, for your reflection ability, but as well as those domain expertise, highlighting on that our role is not going to be replaced, because we still need to make an impact through the assistance of LLM and the strategies of doing prompt engineering, breaking things down into smaller steps, and all that. I hope this session is helpful for you. And if you want to learn more, of course, please feel free to subscribe my YouTube channel. And I aim to produce more sessions like this to support our IR community. Thank you. We don't have a lot of time, but feel free to reach out to me via email, or we can chat, find some time to chat. Thank you.